Welcome to my review of the beautiful 2007 LEGO Star Wars General Grievous Starfighter, set number 7656 with 232 pieces. It originally sold for $20, however, adjusted for inflation, that's about $30 in today's money, and I can totally see it for that $30 price in 2025. So while LEGO's original price has aged well, on the secondary market, new in box, these are going for over $100, so not as cheap as you might want it. Now, I did say this set was from 2007, and so it's a 30th anniversary of Star Wars set. It's got the marking on the top right. It's also got the very nice logo on the left side of the box. And most pretty hardcore LEGO Star Wars fans would remember that battle packs released for the first time in 2007 with the Build Your Army slogan on the box, and other sets from the era also had a minifigure on the bottom left. Now, it didn't say Build Your Army with General Grievous, but having the General Grievous in this kind of weird cutout circle coming through like he's in the Avengers is kind of cool on the box. I just think that's a nice touch there, and it adds some life to it. Also shows a bit of the ground on Utapau. The back of the box is standard for the time, showing off the main play functions, but it actually doesn't show one more hidden play function that we'll discuss in a minute, and it shows some other sets from the January 2007 lineup. Now, cutting into this box was super nostalgic for me. I originally got this set the Christmas it came out, and it was just super hype for me back then as a 10-year-old. Inside, we've got some unnumbered bags, which wasn't atypical for LEGO Star Wars at the time, and of course, your instruction manual. No sticker sheet in this one. The back of the instruction manual was very surprising to me. I do vaguely remember this. It's just this really cool shot of Grievous and his Starfighter on the back, and then flipping through some of the pages at the back, you'll see that there are many more adverts for other LEGO Star Wars sets at the time than you might be used to. It was kind of surprising to me just how many were stuffed in here, but it does look cool. Now, General Grievous is the lone figure in the set, and he looks fairly good for the time. I'm fairly nostalgic for this, but unlike some things, I don't think the nostalgia is strong enough to make me think it's really that good. It's a pretty rough-looking General Grievous. They really did perfect General Grievous, in my opinion, with the version that came out just a few years after this in 2010 for the Clone Wars. This version just pales in comparison and absolutely has not stood the test of time, but he does still have some decent detail to him included from the molding. Obviously, there's not going to be any printing on this one. There's a stud at his back, which is kind of neat and maybe useful for certain builders out there, but I don't think it was ever used for anything useful on the actual Grievous figure. Now, General Grievous with the blaster looks cool, but General Grievous with 4 lightsabers would look even cooler, and they're actually stored on this rack if you don't want him to have to be holding them. So we can take him off the rack and put him in his hands, and if you have them too far forward, he will just fall forward. Otherwise, you have to lean him back quite considerably, which can look awkward. I think the happiest medium is to put a couple arms in front of him and a couple arms behind him so that he has kind of the optimal balance. Of course, none of this matters if you're placing him on studs. Although I will say another thing with this Grievous figure, just having had it as a kid, it did kind of wear poorly, I think, because of how heavy the top side would become, or maybe it was just like the way that we kids played with it. Like, the legs would become really loose over time, and this is something that can happen to battle droids as well, but just particularly with this figure, you would put the lightsabers in his arms, and then even on studs, he would fall straight forward because the clip joint had become just so loose over time. So that's an issue that kind of existed with this figure that doesn't exist with the newer version of Grievous from what I know. So that's something that I would just be aware of if you were maybe intending on buying this set used after watching this review. Might be a reason to buy it new, or at least buy a new pair of legs for Grievous. Now, getting them back on the rack, because if you want to place Grievous inside of a Starfighter, he can't be holding all 4 of his lightsabers. You can place the lightsaber rack underneath of the Grievous Starfighter, and that's the hidden play feature on this Grievous Starfighter. They don't show it off anywhere on the box. They don't indicate that you're getting a rack for all 4 lightsabers. To me, it's a cool hidden bonus feature in the set. You definitely didn't have to have it, but man, is it cool that it's there. The only downside is sometimes you might knock the lightsabers out with your hands as you're holding the set, so I'm just trying to cover all the bases there of what I remember from playing with this. However, it is still just very cool to be able to store your lightsabers underneath there and subsequently hopefully not lose them. Now, the cockpit space for Grievous is fairly small and lacks any detail, like there's no control panel or lever or anything in there, but it is just enough space for Grievous, which at the end of the day is really all you need here. So I do not remember this happening as much as a kid. This is brutal. It's like the 8th time this has happened. Well, maybe this is a good opportunity to show that there is a little extra space at the front for Grievous's feet, as well at the back. They left a small opening so the back of his head mold would fit in there. So actually quite ingenious for the time to give the extra space, because otherwise I don't think he would fit. Now, this is more or less what he would look like if the cockpit was closed as normal with him in there, but as you saw, it just keeps breaking, so it's probably a good opportunity to talk about how this whole mechanism works. or doesn't work. So you've got a couple of stationary bits on the inside. You've got this red clip, and then you've got this here. Now the red clip at the front is supposed to hold kind of the hood and windscreen in when this is, of course, attached. As you can see, it can fall off, but you get it attached, and then that will clip on there, and it basically holds it on. Now when you want to remove it, you got to unclip it, and it slides off. Now, obviously, the sliding mechanism is broken, so these have to be reattached. And what makes this mechanism such a pain to repair is that you can't just slide them on and then slide the whole thing back in. That's not going to work. You actually have to completely remove this, then slide it in like that, and now you can reattach it. Let me just get Grievous out of the way to minimize any potential issues here. So I haven't pushed it down yet, but you can kind of see how the mechanism works there. We'll remove this to make life a little bit easier too. But yeah, you push this down and now it's all attached. The problem seems to be that like it just comes apart for some reason or another. It's like kind of finicky with how much you push down to attach part. Look, it already broke. I just reattached it and it already broke. Let's try to reattach it before any of them actually fall out, and then I have to redo the whole process. Something somewhere is catching. I think it might have been this tile pushed up like a slight bit too much, so I switched them around and hopefully that maybe solves the issue. I remembered it so much better. So you'll see I can slide it into this area, but I can never get it to go back to the back of the Starfighter. That is a pain. That like ruins the experience of this whole mechanism. So it's supposed to just slide, clip in like that, and so now it won't just like fall forward. That's what that red clip in there was for. And yeah, it looks really clean when it's like that, but when it's not working, it's one of the biggest pain in the butts I've ever experienced on a Lego Star Wars set. Oh, would you look at that? It all just exploded off again. I think I was actually holding it wrong. So if you open and close the cockpit by holding it here, nothing seems to break or happen, and it probably kind of reinforces that connection every time. But if I do it here, which I have been doing just because it felt natural to me, I think it's going to break. I think we'll see it break just because basically the leverage, yeah, that's why. Okay, all right, well, that makes sense. Problem solved. Don't open it like this. Open it like that. Bad functionality aside, I think that whole cockpit area looks pretty sleek, and that's something that stays true for the rest of this Grievous Starfighter. It's got some colors like this black here that I feel like are wrong, but generally it's very accurate and a very sleek model. It's very tiled off, which is something they were just kind of starting to do around this time for Lego Star Wars, so you're seeing a lot less studs on top, and that just makes the whole model look super clean and sleek, and I think that's something that's really helped this one. Now, the alternating tan and brown here is a nice touch, very accurate and very good looking in there. The dual blaster cannons on top also look great, and they've got this lime green stud at the front, which I think adds a nice bit of color to the front of the Grievous Starfighter. And because of the way they're attached, not that it's like an advertised function, but they can point up and up and up and all the way back actually. And so I think, you know, as a little kid, if you're exploring this set, you can find an extra function like that, but it doesn't take anything away from the look and the design of the set. That's just a fantastic way to have something like that implemented. It's kind of crazy like how simple some of the design stuff on this is, and yet it just looks so good. Perhaps the second most disappointing thing on the set to me is the fin at the back, because it feels like it's something that could have been done accurately, but just unfortunately wasn't at the time. The fin is actually supposed to fold to the back basically and make the ship a little bit sleeker, and it does do this, but just in the opposite way, so you can fold it in. I don't think it looks very good like this because it's not how it's supposed to look. And I guess what's a Starfighter review without a little bit of a swoosh test? As far as flying this thing around, yeah, it performs fairly well. It doesn't have any like huge problems where the wings are going to fall off or anything. You can even hold it by the engines more or less just fine. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend holding it at the back of the ship like a normal person, but it's at the very least a reasonably sturdy build to fly around. This 2007 General Grievous Starfighter is very fun. I would say it hasn't aged perfectly, but if it's something you're interested in buying, I think it has a nice aesthetic to put on the shelf for a nearly 2005 Revenge of the Sith Lego Star Wars set. Of course, it was released a couple years after the movie, which I think was actually good for this set in particular. I do not think it would have been anywhere near as good if it had been released 2 years prior. Assuming I was right about operating the cockpit wrong, this set for its time in 2007 was just about perfect, a near 10 out of 10. Definitely in today's day and age, you would want a little bit more out of the figure selection and all of that. Obviously, it's got some understandable downsides, but I'm stoked to add this one back to my shelves. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you want to check out more 2007 Lego Star Wars set reviews, you can do so on the end screen now.